In general, I do like that we do have competition and distribution now. I definitely get that it's a lot more work and a lot more hassle, potentially, supporting multiple. But I think we are seeing also some benefit from that competition in terms of, there are multiple distributors, but they don't all fill exactly the same niche. And so Lunar they're not the giant corporation that PRH is. They're definitely still 100%, of and from the comics world. But then PRH, they have their own kind of advantages. I'm excited for Universal, kind of entering into, and I think the move from having a printed previews catalog being kind of the single source of truth for new comics data to the world kind of accepting, hey, it's going to be online, it's going to be updated more frequently, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of an overdue change, and it will take, maybe multiple years for kind of everything to kind of adjust and shake out.
What if I told you that one of the most influential forces in comics was not a distributor, was not a publisher, but was actually just a single website based in Texas in this massive warehouse with a vault full of keys and legitimately a football field sized warehouse full of nothing but long boxes? Today, we're talking to Conan Saunders, the president of MyComicShop.com, and the driving force that moves literally millions of comics through our industry every year. This is important because the way that MyComicShop buys and catalogs and prices books completely affects the entire comics ecosystem. Conan grew up in literal comic shops, Lone Star Comics, that eventually became MyComicShop.com when he wrote the first code. And now he runs a warehouse with 54,000 square feet of long boxes, a vault full of key back issues, 135 employees, and one of the most efficient consignment systems in our entire industry. Today, we're going to break down how that warehouse works, how collections come in, how pricing trends affect their stocking choices, and where Conan thinks the market is heading to next. And this is kind of cool, how they know exactly how much space is left in a long box, any long box, in that entire warehouse. So if you're like me and you actually care about how the physical comics make it through all of these weird systems back and forth and into collections and out of collections, this legitimately is the episode for you because we dive deep. All right, let's get into it. Friends and neighbors, Conan Saunders. How are you?
Hey, what an intro. Thank you very much.
Did I get anything wrong?
I think that sounds great.
Perfect.
I'll take it.
Excellent. Well, I'm thrilled that you made the time to come on and discuss this. I know that you guys stay very, very busy. Where is if you're trying to give perspective to someone outside of comics who doesn't know about how the sales platforms work, how do you explain the size and scope of MyComicShop?
So I guess a couple of ways. The very concrete things are just kind of employees and our facilities. So we have 135 employees about. That's very unusual within comics. It's not, and that's not multiple retail locations. That's just all under one roof, packing orders, grading comics. We have around 40 to 45 of those employees are primarily doing grading. And so, outside of like CGC, CBCS, I don't know how many graders they have, but I think there's nobody in comics kind of doing as much grading as we do. And then we have a 54,000 square foot office and warehouse space that we work out of. But that's, it's not a retail oriented space. It's all just warehouse and production area, and lots of heavy activity there to get all the thousands of orders shipped out every week.
54,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that is office space and how much of that is collection space, I guess, is the best way to put it?
So, first of all, I would invite you, if you're ever in the Dallas area, we can give you a tour. That's something we like to do when we have friends.
That is definitely happening. I'm putting that on the list. I actually am from Fort Worth originally, and so I go back once or twice a year to see family. So next time, I'm coming in for the tour. That's happening.
All right. So the building, it's kind of in three sections. We have just the front office up front. That's where like customer service representatives, developers, our seller services team, and some of the kind of the management, kind of the people that are doing more talking on the phone and interacting online. And then that's maybe, 5 or 10% of the building. Then a big area of it is what we call the production floor. That's where kind of the work is happening, grading, processing, imaging, things like that. And then most of the space in the building is for actual warehouse storage. We've got the shelving and lots of long boxes. And we also have a very nice comics vault where the higher value comics are stored.
The comics vault, does it have a vault door in the whole thing?
It does have a full bank style vault door on it.
Oh my gosh. Has anybody ever approached you about, producing a heist movie around comics? Because I think it sounds like you have the setting for it.
Yeah, we have not done that yet.
One of the things that has always fascinated me, it's been many, many years since I've been to your warehouse. In fact, at the time, I believe there were 2 warehouse spaces, and Chris Powell still worked there. That's how long ago this was. It's been many, many years since I've been there, but I have in the meantime, I've been to Midtown, I've been to DCBS, all of the, I try every time I get close, I always try and get in to get a tour. I'm always fascinated by the either technology surrounding, if you think back to like the technology that was used at the Olive Branch warehouse for Diamond before, who knows what's going on there. I'm always fascinated by the leveraging of physical technology, right? Because we're going to talk a lot about, the site and what you've done there. But I'm curious to know what sort of innovations or practical move you've made towards processing comics, or is there anything in particular that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the most obvious one is if you go back years ago, like to the early 2000s, when we did one of those 2 warehouses you mentioned, originally our inventory was stored alphabetically. And so as you're filing inventory and as you're pulling books to sell, you have to kind of shift stuff around, make space, condense space. You also sometimes, with comics, sometimes the titles, it's not entirely tricky, or it's not entirely clear, Batman Dark Knight, does this go under B or D, or different things like that. And so you can end up with things misfiled or filed in 2 different places. So one of the big things we did, and it's been more than 10 years ago now, we moved away from alphabetic filing to just every single item, they're all bagged and boarded and they all are uniquely barcoded. And so comics are just filed by the barcode that goes into a particular box. We know where that comic is, but there's nothing alphabetical about it. Nobody has to look at the comic and figure out where it should be filed. It's all numeric. They're on the barcode.
And so then it's placed in that long box.
Yeah, and related to that, we know we have a lot of data for the thickness of the comics. So just as we're not just carrying new comics. We've got Golden Age comics, and some comics are thicker than others. So we know how much interior space is in a long box on our shelves, and we know how thick the comics are as they're bagged and boarded. So basically our database knows for all the boxes in our warehouse how much free space is in them at any given time. So when we're filing, nobody's, they don't have like a box of books where they're going through and saying, oh, I think there's enough room here to add this book. Instead, the computer's kind of doing all that for them and saying, hey, there's a space that thick in this box, so you should be able to file, these 23 comics into that box. So it kind of pre-generates the labels for that stack of 23, and they can be filed into that box as one group rather than like somebody, doing lots of individual ones and twos here and there.
That's incredible. That's really cool. What is the protocol for the box? Because you said they were long boxes. What is the protocol for where in the box they go? Is it just, for
everything is filed. Newly filed inventory is filed at the front. So there's basically like a numeric index that just counts up and up. So the lowest numbers will be at the back of the box. So whenever you're filing, they just go in at the front.
So the title has zero to do with where it is oriented in the warehouse.
Right. The only thing that comes into play is the value. We have kind of like 3 or 4 segments of storage based on the value of the item, where it's kind of general purpose warehouse storage, or in the vault, or we even within the vault. The step up from there is we have actual safes. So there's different tiers based on the value of the item, but nothing at all to do with like the name of the comic.
So you have safes inside the vault. Okay. Well, see, now this is just reinforcing my idea that we need a heist movie, that it goes to Dallas to get some comics. Just to prove that they can't actually be stolen. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to teach people how to steal from you. So that is fascinating. And you did this 10 years ago or so, you said?
A little more than that. It's all very well established and used now, yeah.
That's incredible. Can you talk about the process? Thank you for sharing this. This is incredible. Can you talk about the process for when you bring a collection in? So, like, let's say you have I don't know if this is, I know that now you have kind of a marketplace where things are sent in and they become part of the inventory and they're on consignment. And I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into that. But do you still purchase full collections from people?
Yeah, totally. So we have kind of 2 main divisions between how we acquire collectible inventory. So one of them is what we call the online want list. And that's been around since the early 2000s. And I describe it as kind of like a reverse shopping cart, where you're looking up comics, but instead of it being comics that you want to buy, you're entering in comics that you own that you want to sell to us.
Yeah.
And so when you do it that way, for every comic you enter, you can see if it's on our want list or not. And that's just based on, do we already have a lot of stock in it? Is it selling quickly? And if it is on our want list, we'll show you how much we're paying for it. And so for some people, that model works really well. So maybe they have 7,000 comics, they enter all of them at any given time, they look and, hey, 300 of my comics are on the want list, I can send them in. And selling that way, you get higher value for the ones that you do sell, but the trade-off is you don't get the convenience of just selling everything kind of in one go. So you're making more per book because it's all stuff that we need for our inventory, but you can't just get rid of all of it at once. The other channel that we sell is what we call our seller services department, and that's much more kind of free-form, traditional, where you can just call us, text us, email us, give us your list of comics, or if it's a big enough collection, we'll fly anywhere in the country to look at it. And our team is also like traveling to Baltimore Comic-Con, Heroes, CalCon, different conventions around the country. And what we like to do is it's kind of like a hub and spoke thing, where our office in Texas is the hub, and then we have, like, when we go to Baltimore Comic-Con, we're buying collections, picking up consignments in that area, but then we're driving trucks back from Baltimore, so we'll also kind of reach out to our customers on the path between Baltimore and Texas, saying, hey, we're going to be coming through. If you've got consignments you want to send us, or a collection, or it doesn't even have to be yours. If you have a friend you heard about has a collection they're wanting to sell, so we can kind of schedule those visits on the drives back.
What percentage would you say of the product coming in is from those trucks that are doing the sorts of hub and spoke activity?
It's hard to say. First of all, like just percentage wise, like new comics, new release comics, pre-orders, stuff that came out within the past month. That's maybe around 15% of our business. So
15.
It's substantial, but there's a lot more sales of the collectible comics that we're doing.
Yeah.
And then within the collectible comics, it's maybe 50% or more is coming in kind of through that collection buying mechanism. And so not all of it is on those like convention trips where we're driving it back. There's a whole lot of collections we buy where we can kind of do it entirely over the phone. We're just talking to people, and then either it's small enough that they're able to ship it to us, or we can schedule like a freight pickup or make other arrangements.
What's an incredible operation. I was incredibly impressed when I saw it probably 15, I don't know, 20 years ago at this point. The fact that it has grown so much in the last decade or two is impressive. All right. Well, so I would love to, at this point, kind of take a step back and talk about this has been your entire life, hasn't it? Your parents started this company. Is that right?
So, the short history. So my dad started out in junior high as a comics fan. He had dyslexia and was late learning to read, and comics helped him kind of get over that hump. And so that comics were an early passion for him. And almost kind of from day one, he was buying and selling comics to help kind of further his own, collecting habit. And, that's back in the day where, you would connect with other collectors through fanzines and ads in the back of fanzines and magazines and, things like that. So he kind of did that off and on through the 60s. He taught art for a while when he graduated from high school and college. But in 1977, he decided to open the first Lone Star Comics store. And my mom was the one at the time who had kind of the higher paying job working for the government that gave us kind of the stability for him to kind of take that leap and open the store. So the first store in 1977, I wasn't born until 1980, so they precede me by a little bit. And then by the mid 80s, the store, we had grown to multiple stores and they were doing well enough that my mom felt secure to leave her kind of stable, higher paying job to come work, for the family business. So from the mid 80s onward, her role was kind of overseeing the finances and accounting and hiring and HR and all that kind of stuff. And so then I grew up in the environment of having the stores. So for most of my childhood, we had 8 retail locations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then, kind of the internet came around in the mid to late 90s, and computer science was the direction that I wanted to go into. So, early days of, building web pages, and that was something, that I could do. And so we had a couple of very early versions of, like a website, kind of rudimentary e-commerce built by other people for us. But by around, I think, 1999, 2000, we had moved to a version just that I built for us. And so everything
kind
of...
20 years old? 19, 20 years old at that point? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Wow. And graduated high school class of 99. And so then the e-commerce part of the business grew, so we kind of the origins there, and part of what made us well prepared for e-commerce is before the internet came around, we already had the 8, retail stores, and some of the larger ones especially, they did have back issue selections, but we had a large warehouse, one of those warehouses, that you got to visit back then, where we had a much larger back issue selection, and so we had mechanisms where that back issue selection could be distributed, out to our retail stores. So we already had kind of the beginnings of the model of having the warehoused large selection that you could then, send out, as needed. And so we took our existing inventory, put it online for our website, and that's, it's it's kind of it's a long tail business model where you have within collectibles, you have a really big selection. There's millions of comics, but it's not something where you just call up and order 1,000 more of this or 500 more of this from the manufacturer. With collectibles, you have to get them from somebody, and so that's been another key thing that we've been able to do over the years is continuing to kind of refine all the different ways that we can bring in inventory from people.
Sure. It's an interesting you mentioned the long tail. This is something I've been having conversations with people recently who I was surprised hadn't heard of Chris Anderson's book. Was it 2000? I just looked it up, 2006. Essentially the idea being that, in retail, there's a certain, if you have a graph, right, you have the where in retail is where in the graph you're going to stop stocking material, right? So on the left hand side of that graph is the things that sell 1,000 copies, and on the right hand side of it is the things that sell maybe 5 or 10 copies. And at some point, every retailer has to decide where I'm going to cut that off. The long tail, because of warehouses and online sales, meant that you could push that out, and somebody like Amazon can sell one item, one copy of an item every year and still be fine. What is the oldest item in your warehouse?
Oldest.
The thing you've held the longest. I'm curious. Do you know?
We've held the longest.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's probably stuff that we've stocked in depth that goes back 20 years or more, or we just haven't sold through it all. Yeah. For kind of higher value collectible inventory, we're pretty good at turning stuff over. So not too much older than like 5 or 6 years for kind of higher value stuff.
Maybe I'm going to try to reword this question. Is there a point where you would no longer restock something, or is your goal to have everything?
So I guess the difference there kind of is with restocking. I guess there's new release product. There's what I just consider collectible comics, and then kind of in between there's stuff that isn't new but is still available for kind of back order purchase through the distributors. We could probably be doing more to pull in some of that back order product, and we do for stuff that sells well, but for a lot of stuff, once it kind of passes the higher traffic period, we're maybe not actively stocking it from distributors, but it's on our want list. We're buying it in collection, so it's coming in that way, but it's a little bit more of a passive thing where we get it if somebody sells it to us on our want list or it comes in on a collection, rather than us saying, hey, here's these 80 graphic novels that came out 10 to 15 years ago. Let's go in and pull in fresh copies of them.
Right. I think that's the answer to the question, but I just want to clarify. There's not a point where you would say, all right, we finally sold the last copy of this. We're not going to put it on the want list. Anything that comes in goes out. There's
never nothing ever gets cut off as this is no longer something that we would stock.
That in and of itself is impressive. I mean, you're essentially saying that you have a system where every comic that's ever been printed should be available, right? That's incredible. All right, so there, I think we're in our narrative. We put it into say the early aughts at some point in around 2008 or 9. Is that right? Or at some point, when did you pivot completely to online sales?
So it wasn't, I guess, first of all, it wasn't too many years into the 2000s when the online part was selling more than all the retail stores combined. So our stores, they weren't profitable. They were doing fine. They weren't troubled or anything. It's just that the online part was bigger than the stores.
Can I pause there for just 1 second in the narrative? What do you attribute that to? Was it because of your, sort of really deep inventory, or was there one particular secret sauce? Because at that point there were a lot of places online you could buy comics.
I think it was essentially our selection, our very large inventory, and then being able to sell to the entire world.
Right. Gotcha. All right. Cool. Anyway, sorry. Carry on with the narrative.
So so the online part was growing and kind of bigger than the stores, and then the other part of it, I mentioned my mom was in charge of kind of HR and staffing and finances. There's just there are a lot more management concerns with multiple retail locations and kind of employee turnover at retail locations. And sometimes if they're too far away and you don't have a strong enough manager, you have to watch out for theft and just different things that happen as a small business owner. And so it's just, we found that it's a lot easier managing people kind of for online sales out of one centralized location where you're there on site every day versus trying to support the retail, all the retail activity.
Sure.
So partly to simplify life kind of for my mom and the management, but also just to kind of zero in on the area where we thought we had strong competitive advantages and big further opportunities to scale. We decided to zero in on the e-commerce. So like you said, it's kind of starting in the late 2000s, heading into 2010, 2011, 2012. Our 8 retail stores, we sold them. We're proud, none of the stores needed to close. Nobody lost their jobs. It was all kind of smooth transitions to new ownership. About half of the stores went to outside buyers, and about half the stores went to former store managers to kind of take over and continue operating.
And many of those are still open, all right? The collective stores are still open. I'm trying to think. Oh, shoot. What is his name? He still has one or two. Anyway, yes. I mean, I know many of that legacy still is there in the DFW area. And they still feel a little bit like Lone Star stores, too, if I'm being honest. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, thank you. That's excellent. So you moved into this area. At that point, did you consolidate to the one warehouse?
So during all that time, like 80s, 90s, 2000s, our original physical space was comic retail store up front, back office in the back, and then as that store grew and as the business grew, we would move the back office part kind of to the adjacent space and kind of like the little strip mall, so it can take up more room. The store could be bigger. Then eventually that store moved across the street. The back office part got even bigger. And so over time, that area, we just kind of spilled out into adjacent spaces within this little strip mall. We had the warehouse, the yellow warehouse out back, and then later built another warehouse behind that. So we had kind of this little constellation of buildings. They're all in close proximity, but you would have things like departments working on comics kind of in one building, but then they would have to load those comics onto a cart, take them outside, like roll across the parking lot to get to the next building for those comics to be worked on. And if it's raining, you more hassles. So we had just kind of really outgrown that space that we started in, behind our original retail store. And so it was in 2013 we decided to look for a space where we could kind of consolidate everything. And so that's where we end up where we are now with the 54,000 square foot warehouse, able to kind of put everything under one roof. And it's been very, very helpful for us.
Yeah, I no doubt. That sounds it sounds incredible. All right, so you personally then, right around, according to what the research I've been able to do, 2010 vice president, and then 2021 you move into president co-owner. Talk about that transition. I'd love to hear about what's it like having your career be, with your parents, because that feels so alien to me. And then what is that sort of transition of power? How does that work out? Because, Buddy Saunders, your dad, Judy, your mom, Buddy's been very outspoken over the years and very, he's a very big personality. What is it like to kind of step into that role?
Well, just first in terms of kind of, working with my parents, the thing that I always tell people is I feel very fortunate having this. Well, number one, comics is just a fun business. So
yeah,
my parents are, they have a comic business. It's not insurance or pipe fittings, or it could be many other more boring things. But the other really cool thing for me is I've always gotten to be, I feel like I've gotten to be entrepreneurial, but within the context of a stable, successful business. So going back to the late 90s, kind of building our first website or everything since then, I get to have an idea and then go out and try to build it and make it happen to kind of grow the business. But I'm not, like, as an individual, I was never needing to take a big risk, max out my credit card, take out a second mortgage, anything like that. And this also kind of ties into talking about kind of my career and titles and everything. For one thing, we are big in terms of number of employees, but it's still a small family business. Titles aren't super critical, so it's not that, like, me putting vice president, on a particular year on my LinkedIn profile didn't necessarily, it's a very gradual thing. So for me, over the years, my kind of career trajectory has gone from, at the very beginning, basically I was our primary and only software developer, building our website. And that was entirely my role. And then as time went on, I was the primary software developer, but kind of developer lead, like also leading one or two or multiple other people. And then just as time went on, that role kind of, I would characterize it as essentially business development. So just still doing all that, but also with the freedom to kind of have ideas of what should we expand into next? How can we generate more business? So for example, a really big one was in 2010 is when we launched the consignment service. And that was kind of my idea and my push for us to get into that. And the reasoning for that was with slab comics, you can, like, if you have a CGC graded comic, you can go onto eBay and sell it yourself pretty easily. Buyers trust the grade in the way that they don't if it's just not slabbed. And eBay, eBay charges a commission. But for us as a retailer, it can be hard to compete to say, well, you should just be selling your stuff to us. That's the only way to do it versus just list your $500 slab comic yourself on eBay. And so the consignment model gave us an additional tool to offer to people to say, hey, we can basically provide you the same service, not just the same service, better service than what you can get with eBay, because, like, say you've got 20 or 30 comics you want to sell on eBay, you're going to have 20 or 30 different buyers, 20 or 30 different boxes to pack and trips to the post office, versus if you were to consign that with us, you're just sending us one shipment with everything. We get it all recorded and set up for you, but you're making kind of the same amount of money or more you would get selling on eBay. So anyway, just that was my kind of gradual expansion of roles from software developer to having ideas, how to grow the business, like kind of being involved with the growth of the consignment part of our business. And then just as we get closer into modern times, kind of more and more general purpose, management type stuff. And so then in 2021, my dad had a stroke, and it happened while he was at work. And fortunately, we found him very quickly. So within just a few minutes of it happening. But when he had the stroke, he initially lost all kind of muscle control on half of his body. And so he had, several weeks of rehab and, things like that. And so he and my mom and I, we decided when that happened, that was kind of a good time to sort of pass the torch to me. So to officially designate me as president of the company. But Buddy is, so number one, he recovered really well from the stroke. So he's doing great.
Thank goodness.
But he just loves working with comics. He loves what he does. And so for him, his version of retirement is still working fully in the business, but just working only on the projects that he wants to work on, working on the things he wants to pursue.
Right.
And so he's still very actively involved.
Can you talk about what that is? Like what is his day to day these days? Is there any particular part of the business that he, absolutely has to have his fingers on?
He does a lot of things with buying collectible inventory. So buying collections from people, he loves finding kind of cool, very unusual inventory on eBay, things to kind of further expand our catalog. He's also now and for a very long time has been kind of instrumental and key in our efforts to grow and expand our catalog. So, pushing to not just every comic ever made, we want to have information about it, but also pulp magazines and, different kind of comic adjacent things, digests, stuff like that. So he's doing a lot of kind of catalog building, getting information into our database, doing lots of kind of inventory management. So just things like reviewing sales patterns and, hey, this title is selling well, we need to raise prices or lower prices, or that kind of stuff. He has put tens and tens of thousands of hours into that kind of work, over the years.
The same personality that builds something like that, it's hard to switch that off. I cannot imagine. Every time we talk about retirement, the idea just feels impossible. I don't know what that feels like. It's because I don't come to work because I got to make some money. It's usually because this is really exciting, this thing that I'm working on. Why would I want to stop doing the exciting things? So how you came on 2021, that was right in was it during the stroke and you kind of taking the reins? Was that in the middle of COVID? How did that work out?
And I wouldn't say that there was any, again, titles aren't.
You stepping further in because your dad needed to step back. I'm trying to put that in perspective of what things were going on, because the COVID shutdown really affected the collectibles market in an incredible way. What I'm trying to get a feeling for is, where were you, you were dropping into this just as the world is blowing up? What does that look like for you?
So it was, I think kind of by summer 2000 already things were on the upswing, where we, you had the first kind of the month or two of COVID where things were closed. There was all the, kind of controversy within the comics world with, Diamond being closed and, different things like that. But kind of by the summertime, especially for us again, where we're, the new release product is around 15% of our business, but the collectibles, that was booming.
Sure.
So just kind of keeping up with that, and then getting into 2021, being in that type of kind of energetic market, it's fun. It's it doesn't last forever, but it was great. The enthusiasm of everybody, while it was happening, and so it's just kind of. You're kind of rushing to, it's hard to keep inventory in stock because people feel like prices are going up every month, and so they're buying the stuff, and then you're having to pay new kind of all-time high prices to get it, and all while kind of balancing that against the concern of, hey, when this does slow down, you don't want to get stuck. And so I think overall we did well. Us just kind of like any buyer of collectible comics during that period. There was some stuff that we bought kind of towards right at the peak, that we end up, kind of stuck with and, having to sell it at a loss, but nothing too bad. And we certainly did better with everything we sold, all the business we had, kind of on the way up, than the little bit of poorly timed purchases, right at the end. But we kind of random sidetrack, but, people sometimes people will ask me about a particular book and whether it's a good investment, or what do I think something's going to be worth more a year from now or whatever. And we never buy inventory as an investment as a company. We just buy it to turn it over quickly. So we want to buy it at a price where we can make money on it, but we're not buying something because we think that 3 years from now or 5 years from now it will have appreciated some amount. We're just buying it so that we can sell it for a little bit more, to a collector who wants it. And for collectors who ask me, hey, should I buy, like, I get questions like, should I buy this Hulk 181 or should I buy this Fantastic Four #1 or whatever? And it always just depends on, well, what's the grade and what price can you get it at? It's you can have, it can be a great book, but if you're overpaying, it's a bad purchase, and all that kind of stuff.
You, maybe more than anybody, has a good look at what comics as a collectibles market, as back issues as a sector, right? You have a view like no other about whether or not that appreciates or depreciates over time, right? I mean, you now have all of this inventory that you are essentially have a system that would allow you to own every comic that's ever been produced. Do you, when you look at things like carrying costs and that sort of thing, are you looking at an appreciating investment for all of that, just based on, I mean, obviously it depends on what you pay for it and that sort of thing, but I'm saying over time, would you say that comics go up in value?
I guess it's hard to say, just because we like so much of what we sell is comics that we're selling for like $3 a piece or $5 a piece. And the conversation for that type of comic is so different from, a slabbed Hulk 181 that's $2,000, that kind of thing.
Right.
I think the higher value, key, expensive, older comics, they do have some, kind of long-term appreciation trend. The just kind of general purpose, broad spectrum, lower dollar back issues, I think they, in general, are more or less holding their value. But I think if you just have a collection of lots and lots of $5 comics, that by itself, it's not going to majorly appreciate over time.
Right. Okay. So it's not like just buying up comics is like a mutual fund that will appreciate over time. It's just you're at some point you're just buying comics. That's what you're saying. I get that. Okay. Wonderful. I wanted to get into something that is near and dear to my heart, but is going to bore the tears out of many people. So I apologize in advance to those of you who've stuck around for the first 45 minutes of this conversation. And let's talk about metadata. So this has been a conversation that has affected, I would say many parts of our industry without people understanding why it's so important. I know that you were involved in the development of the Comet standard. I would love to hear from you about why that was something that you felt like was important, and what does that mean to the industry of comics, to our sales potential.
Well, I think for retailers, it's about kind of convenience and just getting the data smoothly into a form where you can work with it. It depends on how the retailer is interacting with the data. So going back years, if all you ever did was do things on paper with a previews catalog and you weren't computerized, it wouldn't have really mattered to you. But when you do have computer systems, and so you're pulling in data files, when there are errors in the data files, that gives you headaches. You have to go and resolve them. When there's information gaps, when stuff is offered for sale but there's no cover art or whatever, you're just creating more work for retailers, and you're making it harder for retailers to sell those comics as to the customers that might choose to pre-order them. And so all the data efforts, it's just meant as an industry to kind of come together and streamline that whole process, so that just my big issue is, if there's a problem with a data file and we as a company have to deal with it, say it takes us an hour or half an hour or whatever to kind of figure out what the issue is, adjust it, or maybe a few emails back and forth to get the correct information. Presumably there are at least a dozen or more other retailers that also have the computerized systems, or hundreds of other retailers, depending on how they're pulling their data in, who have kind of the same issue. And I don't want all of those people to be wasting their time all dealing with the same issue. So, having the comment group, part of that is to have kind of a centralized thing where, hey, let's bring this out in the open, let's talk about it, and then let's do a permanent fix so that once this issue, like this has come up with Lunar a couple of times. So just a very common data thing is when you have like a text file, comma separated values, if you have a double quote in one of the values, it needs to be escaped so that it doesn't, end that field. It's meant as plain text. And so when a data file comes through and something isn't escaped, I don't want you to just fix that one individual entry, because then that entry is clean, but then you could have the same problem a month down the line. I want you to fix, the system so that every value going into that field from now till forever will automatically be escaped properly, and so then that problem, is eliminated. So I think it's a bunch of little things like that collectively the comment group is helping to address. And so that maybe that's kind of tier one, is just kind of eliminating bugs and problems, and then tier two is going a step beyond that and providing a nice unified framework where publishers can help retailers sell more books. So they're providing better descriptive data. They're for things, different kind of order gimmicks of, ratios or thresholds or whatever, having that information come through in a form that's clear and easy to understand and easy to interact with, where retailers don't have to kind of jump through a lot of hoops to figure out, well, how do I qualify for this? How many do I qualify for? All that kind of stuff.
Are you optimistic about the effects of that? I mean, the comment standard, you guys started on this one, I want to say like 3 years ago at this point. Are you optimistic about where that's going as a project?
I'm optimistic. I think it's already accomplished a lot, and I've been, I think the organizers of the group have been fantastic, and I'm really surprised by kind of how much buy-in they've gotten from the publishers and distributors, because that's key. And if you go back to the world kind of where Diamond was the only one in the picture, there was never the kind of the critical mass of support for making those kinds of changes. So it's encouraging, how much support there is from kind of everybody across the industry. I feel like the activity has maybe slowed down a little bit recently, so I hope that we kind of keep the momentum that we've had the previous couple of years, and we don't just kind of say, hey, this is done, but we continue to work, quarterly or whatever on, okay, have we solved all these problems, or is there anything what do we need to do next? How can we push this further?
That actually does lead to a question that I had, I think, specifically for you, kind of in a broad sense, as a leading light in sort of the direct market, and having worked with so many different distributors and other, you now, I assume, or I mean, if you consider all of those collectors, your vendors, you deal with hundreds of vendors every month. What would you say that leaving aside the sales trends, would you say that the direct market is now in a stronger place than it was, let's say 5 years ago? Then say right as 2020 happened, before the COVID split, before those kind of things, when we were all at Diamond, everything was still pretty consolidated. Would you say that we're in a stronger position now, or would you say that that was a place where we, maybe went off the rails? That's
tricky. I think we are stronger now. We at Lone Star, we've always been fans, of Diamond. We didn't have the issues with Diamond, that a lot of other retailers, did. In general, I do like that we do have competition in distribution now. I definitely get that it's a lot more work and a lot more hassle, potentially, supporting multiple. But I think we are seeing also some benefit from that competition in terms of, there are multiple distributors, but they don't all fill exactly the same niche. And so Lunar is they're not the giant corporation that PRH is. They're definitely still 100% of and from the comics world. But then PRH, they have their own kind of advantages, I'm excited for Universal, kind of entering into, and I think the move from having a printed previews catalog being kind of the single source of truth for new comics data to the world kind of accepting, hey, it's going to be online, it's going to be updated more frequently, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of an overdue change, and it will take maybe multiple years for kind of everything to kind of adjust and shake out in relation to that. Even with our business, the pre-order part of our website is one of the oldest parts of the website that's gone the longest without a major update. So right now we still have a lot of programming that's designed around kind of the Diamond way of doing things and the Diamond data files, and taking that core and then just kind of slapping one band-aid after another on top of it to, hey, let's adjust to how Lunar does things, let's adjust to, there's multiple distributors. But over time, I think just with people kind of updating their software and getting used to the Comet data standard, I think that's going to pay benefits versus having that kind of very rigid printed catalog model.
I agree with you. I think that I think we're heading into a really wonderful period of sales. Are you seeing the same sorts of? You said that 15% of your overall sales is new product. What are you seeing as far as the change? What is the shift? Are you seeing growth? Are you seeing contraction? Are we staying the same? Like, what does the last couple of years look like for you?
Last couple of years have, I'd say, been maybe single digit growth or kind of holding about the same. I've definitely seen some reports of broader comic retailers being up more significantly, and I think that hasn't been our experience. We are growing, just not growing as much as maybe I've heard some other retailers. My experience from so with the kind of COVID era peak, and obviously COVID didn't impact the prices of new release comics the way that they did with the collectibles, but kind of from summer 2022, kind of when that market peaked, and then 2023, 2024, and then now most of this year. My sense of our business is that we've been growing, but we've been growing a little bit against a difficult kind of market backdrop. So they're just kind of evening out a little bit. And that's kind of the same experience we had, the kind of 2008 financial crisis. Is the economy wasn't great, but we were able to still grow. We just didn't grow as much as we did otherwise if the economy had been kind of boosting us along.
I'd like to take a quick shift. Thank you for that. I appreciate that view into your place in the market. I wanted to talk about you talk about having one of the largest catalogs in comics, possibly the largest. We deal a lot with new publishers who are entering the scene. A lot of the content that we create is some of their audience is that, and some of our clients are people that we're bringing into the direct market. If someone is, say, a self-publisher, has been working in conventions, has kind of done their own self-distribution into stores, do they have access to getting their if they don't yet have distribution? Is there a way they should be thinking about approaching you as a publisher? Is that something that you're open to?
We've done a little bit of that. So Ripaverse, ISOM, he's local to us, so we did kind of some stuff with him with his books. In general, for the most part, it's things where we can get it with the convenient data coming in from PRH, from Lunar, whoever. We're much more likely to support that. We don't have I wish we did, but we don't have a well-developed capability for just kind of working with one-offs, like that.
Right.
We can do, sometimes very small-scale things, kind of on a consignment model, but that's, to some degree, like at such a small scale, like is it worth it?
Right. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It is an interesting problem for one of the things I find most fascinating about where comics is right now is that you can build sustainable businesses, in such small little pockets, just all over the place. There is no one, organizing column that you have to be involved in. And so it's always interesting to me to see how people can work their way in. Okay, I think we're coming in on. I want to be respectful of your time. Where do you see the growth of comics going? Are there markets that you think that we're going into? Is there the sales you mentioned that the other retailers are seeing and you're seeing incrementally? Would you say that that's going to lead to longer growth tail of for the collectibles market? Or, where do you see the collectibles side of this going in the next, say, 5-10 years?
Collectibles are very healthy. There will always be, kind of ups and downs, different segments within collectibles. So the one that I, tend to kind of beat up on is like Western comics. There's still people that collect Western comics, but they're definitely not, it's not their heyday anymore. The people that were into them, they're older, and they don't have kind of the same coolness appeal to modern collectors that like a Golden Age horror comic or even like Golden Age romance comics. There's tons and tons of collectors my age or younger where they certainly didn't grow up handling or reading those really old comics, but the covers are cool, the stories are cool, that kind of stuff, and so they're fun to collect. And so whether it's comics or I know sports cards and trading cards, or they're kind of the big brother collectible category, for comics, and that's booming right now. I think like comics has kind of long ago weathered kind of the approach of digital comics. Is digital comics going to be a threat to print comics? And I think it's a nice adjunct to it, but it's not threatening print comics. And I kind of feel the same way about physical collectibles, in terms of it's not for everybody. Not everybody can devote the space, in where they live to having the collection, or some people do prefer reading online, or there's always the competition from just Netflix and scrolling on your phone and all that kind of stuff. But I think my perspective is the collectibles market is very healthy. We've come a long way from kind of late 90s, early 2000s, where it was kind of the Wild West on eBay, and there's kind of all this discovery taking place of, hey, I remember that from 30 years ago. I can now find it on eBay, and people not knowing, is this thing really rare or is it actually really common? And so, in kind of the 25-ish years since then, so much of that has shaken out, and so much more of collectibles, and you can see this on our website. There's a whole lot more that's kind of easy to find, and so it has been to some degree kind of defined, and the pricing is much more precise now, and the grading with slabbing is precise. So there's just a lot more information available to collectors, and I think not everybody likes slab comics, and that's fine. You can collect whatever you want, but there's just more tools and information and ways to interact with collectibles, kind of than ever before. And it's another side of it is it's easier to find, communities online of kind of like-minded people. So whether it's message boards or Discord or whatever. So just I don't know. I don't have predictions for like 30 years out, 50 years out, but for 5 to 10 years, I definitely, we're totally in on comics. We're continuing to kind of invest further in our business. And so, we're not going anywhere, and we see a lot of good things ahead for comics and collectibles in general.
You have stayed incredibly focused on the comics as collectibles market. As you said, your dad is broadening out to other magazines and that sort of thing. But I'm really fascinated by the idea that you didn't get distracted by, say, NFT market, right? Could have been an obvious vertical for you if that had been a real thing. You've not gotten distracted by, say, toys or, trading cards or any of those things. Is that intentional, or is it just you're just so busy focusing on getting this right, like that you get the blinders? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so if you go back again to the early 2000s, initially our online inventory was just kind of mostly a copy of what we carried in our stores. So it wasn't just comics, but we did offer action figures and toys and t-shirts, the things you could have in our stores. And in some cases, the inventory was in our warehouse, and in some cases it would be, this is the inventory that we know is across the street in our Arlington store, but if somebody buys it, we'll go pull it. But pretty early on, we decided to focus in on basically periodicals and printed things. They're flat rectangles. They can all ship together. They, like this, I think of this in terms of Diamond and kind of their issues people had with them with shipping costs. And it's a lot easier to cheaply and effectively package a box that only contains comics and magazines and graphic novels than if there's also like one action figure in it, or certainly like one statue, or that kind of thing.
Right.
And so that was our early decision, is to focus in on those printed periodical items, because we could store them well, we could ship them well, all that kind of stuff. And we've kind of stuck with that model since then. I do have interest in, I think the next, so we've stuck with that model, and every time we've had the opportunity to do something else, we've decided that looks like a good opportunity, but we think that there are better opportunities for us just doubling down within comics. And I think that has really paid off. We are interested in also supporting cards as kind of our next kind of lateral expansion. They're, in a lot of ways, they're very similar to comics in terms of the
flat rectangles.
They're rectangles. They're just smaller rectangles. They don't take up a lot of space. We can ship them easily. There's lots of kind of data and catalogs in the same way that we have data and catalogs for our comic inventory. So I think that's something that we want to get into. We just a weekend or two ago, we had kind of a once in a lifetime card collection consigned with us. Somebody that's been a consigner and a friend of ours. His son was a Pokemon collector, like from the earliest days in the 90s. So he and his son bought they put together 2 full sets of all the earliest Pokemon cards, one to actually play with, and then one full set the dad just set away into a binder kind of from day one.
Yeah.
So he had, none of them have been professionally graded yet or anything, but it's from the earliest Pokemon set through the next like 6 or 7. He's got every single card in really good shape. So we're just kind of excited about that as a good opportunity for us to, hey, let's kind of take this step into cards with this kind of incredible collection here.
I can definitely see that. All right, a couple last questions here. One, what is that lunchbox there right next to your eye? I'm just curious about the collection of the guy with the biggest collection. What are the things that are get you excited?
Well, so I've got 2 back there, and neither one I would say is really my collection. They're my childhood lunchboxes. So the bottom one, the blue one, I've got a Masters of the Universe lunchbox. Nice. I was a big He-Man fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And the purplish one above that is My Pet Monster, and that was another thing that I had when I was a kid. Yeah. But so me personally, I don't. I guess I don't know how visible it is back there. But like my wife and I have a bunch of trades and graphic novels, different things we've read. Yeah. But it's just stuff that we've accumulated as we've read them. I don't have my own collection. I feel like I scratch that itch every day with all the comics I get to work with through the business. And then the other part of that is, when I was growing up, my dad has his childhood collection, which is kind of largely DC's, like from the 50s and 60s, and kind of early, like kind of the like Red Kryptonite era Superman, and Batman, pre-70s Batman, stuff like that. And so those were the comics that I read heavily growing up.
Does he still have that separated?
He's got his collection room with all those comics.
That's wonderful. I love that. What you see and deal with a lot of comics that come in. What gets you excited when it shows up now? I mean, obviously that Pokemon collection sounds amazing, but is there any kind of thing that you still get that kind of thrill when it comes in the door?
I try to kind of remind myself that things that I see a bunch are still very exciting to a lot of other people.
Sure.
It's easy to get kind of desensitized, where basically if it's not very rare Golden Age comics, then you kind of see it all the time. So like Amazing Fantasy 15 is a really cool comic, but they come through pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And so they're expensive. But so the stuff for me that I really like are the really just the cool Golden Age covers. Some of them are pretty gruesome, and like the Marvel Mystery Comics, just the really busy Human Torch, Submariner, wrecking Nazis, all that kind of stuff. Just the cool horror and like Matt Baker romance comics, and so that's just kind of the nature of seeing the comics so frequently. Is kind of anything Silver Age or newer, for the most part, is pretty common.
Seen it, yeah.
And but that's what I like, and I guess this is maybe true of every hobby. But what I like about comics is there's something all the way up and down the spectrum of how common it is, how scarce it is, how expensive it is. So the stuff that you grew up reading is probably really accessible, but then if you want to go for higher grade or older stuff, or the really old Golden Age, or some people go further back into like the Victorian era platinum stuff, or people go into, if just comics are too common for you, then you can get into original art where everything's kind of one of a kind, and that's very tough to get into.
Yeah, expensive is a good word. Awesome. Well, I feel like we've covered a whole lot of ground, Conan. Is there anything particular that you wanted to make sure that our literal dozens of viewers see?
No, just if you haven't visited our website, we have a really big selection of comics that we want to sell you, but we also, like we've discussed here, we buy entire collections, we take consignments, so we're happy to kind of work with anybody, however they want to, if they have collectibles that they want to sell.
Conan, thank you so much. MyComicShop.com. Is there any other place people can interact with you? Do you do social media? I
think pretty much all the socials under My Comic Shop. Cool. And maybe for this podcast audience specifically, so I was at Comics Pro this last year, and I'm going to be there again.
Excellent.
This upcoming February, and this time we're bringing a couple of other employees. So just anybody that wants to connect further, including you, looking forward to talking with you at Comics Pro.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it too. I'll see you in February. Awesome. Well, thank you, Conan. Thank the rest of you for tuning in. Once again, this is Comic Industry Insiders that, you probably should have already liked and subscribed and hit the alert button so you can get the live ones. I don't know. You choose what you're going to do. All right. Thank you so much, buddy. We will see you in February.
All right. See you.